In this lesson, we are going to talk about 3ds Max's light compatibility with V-Ray and basically how 3ds Max lights can be utilized in V-Ray. First of all, I wouldn't recommend using 3ds Max's lights with V-Ray even though they work, but always remember that V-Ray lights are optimized to work with V-Ray and almost all the time will give you better results. Let's start with 3ds Max's daylight system, which can easily work with V-Ray, and it offers some features that V-Ray sun and sky system does not. For this part of the lesson, I'm going to be using the scene from the lesson that we talked about V-Ray sun and sky. So open up 0205 underscore V-Ray underscore sun underscore and underscore sky underscore start dot max. Now in the Create panel, select Systems, and from the Standard section, you can choose Daylight. In the top view, click and drag to create the system. Release the mouse and move your mouse to position the sun. Perfect. And now you have created a daylight system. Now you need to define V-Ray sun and sky as your sunlight and your skylight in the daylight parameters. Go to the modify panel in the daylight parameters. Select V-Ray sun as your sunlight. Now, like when we were adding a normal V-Ray sun, V-Ray wants to add a V-Ray sky map to the environment too. Let's say yes. Now, if I run the RT, you can see we have a V-Ray sun and sky. Now I can change the position mode to manual and start positioning the sun exactly like I would have done it if it was a V-Ray sun, and the results are exactly the same. Great, let's stop the active shade. I can change the position mode to date, time, and location, and now if I click on the setup button, I can set the time, date, and location, and V-Ray will automatically position the sun to be in the proper direction. Let's change the month to maybe September and time to 6:30 a.m. Now, if I run the active shade, the sun is positioned based on those data. If I get back to the modify panel, we have V-Ray sun parameters rollout, and you can control all the aspects of the V-Ray sun and sky like you used to. So that's how you can use 3ds Max's daylight system with V-Ray. Next, let's talk about other 3D Max lights and see how they work with V-Ray. For this part of the lesson, I'll be using the scene from the first lesson of this section. So open up 0201, area lights, plane, disk, sphere, start.max, and let's get started. From the Create panel, go to the lights and choose Standard. Obviously, mental ray lights are out of question as we are working with a different render engine. Also, V-Ray doesn't support skylights, but you can safely use spot, direct, and omni lights. In this case, let's select target spotlight and start creating the light in the top viewport. Now you can move the light up in the front view. In the render setting, make sure active shade is active and the output size should be square, maybe 500 by 500 pixels, and let's render the scene. Now select the spotlight and let's see what we have here. The first thing you need to do is to make sure your light has proper V-Ray shadows. In the shadows option, you can see we have two V-Ray options, V-Ray shadow and V-Ray shadow map. V-Ray shadow is capable of producing realistic shadows, and shadow map produces mapped shadows, which is a bit more traditional method, and I don't think there is any need to discuss it in this series. So let's set V-Ray shadow as our shadow type. In the spotlight parameters, let's set the hotspot to 10 and fall off to 15. Also in the intensity rollout, set the multiplier to something like 20. Right now, even though we have selected V-Ray shadows as our shadow type, but as it's obvious from the RT, the shadows are very sharp and unrealistic. You need to come down to V-Ray shadow parameters rollout and enable area shadows. As you can see now, the shadows look a lot better. Now we can decide how the area shadows are going to be calculated. We can choose box or sphere. If set to box, V-Ray will assume that the light source has a box shape, and using U, V, and W size, you can change the dimension of that assumed box. And as you make the box bigger, the shadows are going to get softer and diffuser. Also, you have sphere, and if set to sphere, now V-Ray will assume that the light source has a spherical shape, and in this case, U size controls the radius of the sphere. For the omni and direct lights, you would get the same option like spotlight, so I think that would be enough for this lesson. So in this lesson, we learned about 3ds Max Lite's compatibility with V-Ray. I'll see you in the next lesson.